We decided to organize the second of our virtual open house sessions again into 3 panels. So we're very fortunate to be joined by a number of our alumni, our teachers, as well as some of our current students. So our guests who are in the audience today with us could get a chance to enter the Knowles building, join our community to get a sense of what it's like to study at Hong Kong U in the architecture studies undergraduate program. The first of the panels we've titled, What Are Our Futures After the BAAS? That will be introduced and moderated by Thomas. Thomas, do you want to just wave? Thomas is one of our wonderful colleagues, and he will be introducing his panelists who are alumni literally from all over the world, rejoining us in this building again. The second of the panels we've titled Studying Architecture at Hong Kong U, Thinking, Testing, and Making. The title actually went through a few iterations. We were trying to express what is it like to actually be in this building, to be one of the students. So this panel will be moderated by Roberto, who is one of our wonderful colleagues as well. And he will also be joined by Tang, can you wave? As well as Aika, 2 other colleagues and their students. So they'll be giving you a sense of what is it like from the teachers and students' perspective to be studying here and to be part of this community and studio here. And the last of the sessions, we'll be talking as a group about what do we look for in architecture studies. We noticed most of the questions from the last virtual open house was, how do we get in? And I think this is of course, utmost importance, especially for the students who will be putting down Band A, not only Band A, but Band A1 coming into Hong Kong U. So what do we actually look for? And this will be a bigger conversation that will segue also into the question and answer session. I want to also introduce Eric, who is the head of the department. Eric will be joining us throughout the session, and of course also in the Q&A especially. So if there are any questions, we want to really very much introduce this virtual open house as if it was actually in physical space. You're with us in our auditorium where there's a lot of interaction, where there's a lot of kind of physical kind of chance to get to see what it's like to be in here. So without further ado, I would like to pass the baton over to Thomas.
Hello, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen.
Oh, I will stop.
Can you guys see my screen with the yellow background with the posters? Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, everybody. It's good to see similar colleague and faces, and also some of our alumni and our current students. And I know I probably won't be able to see most of you, but I would like to say hello and thanks for joining us. Today I'll be hosting the sessions called What is Our Future After the BAS? And I want to divide this into 3 sections: what was before, during, and after. I'll give you a little introduction. My name is Thomas Sang. I'm an associate professor. I'm the year 3 coordinator, and I have been here and teaching at Hong Kong U for the last 10 years. Before Hong Kong U, I was teaching in New York and at Cooper Union. And during this couple years, I haven't been involved in the BAS heavily. And so today I'm going to show you what's going to be happening with our teaching the last couple months. So the spring semesters, we're currently looking at a project of a legacy of a work named John Hayek. And I'm going to show you some films of work. You might want to check your volume because it might be quite loud.
We just take a second and
Station built by U.S. Navy becomes nerve center of Radio France, as U.S. government turns this gigantic transmitter over to French. Now France will have sending and receiving station in new world of sound. And Monsieur Deschamps.
Radio waves. This area for both the picture and sound. These short radio waves travel only in a straight line and cannot follow the Earth's surface. Therefore, the limit of television is the distance from the antenna to the horizon. Of the Empire State Building, a photograph can be taken only as far as the eye can see on a perfectly clear day.
Fear is fear itself.
So this work were all done during this semester when we heard that we're all going to be working, reconvert our home into our studio. And so these were the work that was produced during the first 5 weeks when we decided a way of actually to continue our studio was also to somehow produce a film produce a film, but through the many models making process that the students has engaged. And I'm going to show you two more works. Okay. So this is what looks like 6 months ago when we're all together. We're running a studio back in Hong Kong U on the third floor of Nose. And so what we noticed that from many of these transitions, I realized the enthusiasm and the energy still continues through the works. I'm going to show you some works that we also done last semester when we developed a new programs called Artists in Residence. We invited a distinguished architects internationally, and this person's named Perry Kopler, to come and join us for 1 week to develop a master course. And I'll show you this the work that was presented. This week we had an opportunity to bring Perry Kopler to be our inaugural artists in residence or architects in residence at the Department of Architecture at University of Hong Kong. Gives us an opportunity to develop a masterclass working together with our undergraduate year 3 as along with our graduate students together with also Chiao Tung University.
So the interest for the workshop really emanated from worlds that are more homogeneous or schematic. And I was interested in trying to let the students engage worlds that might implicate other worlds as a result of worlds that we're in often that are stripped of multiplicities or other kinds of lives. So that was part of it. The other part of it was to try to figure out how to work with appropriated things that have to do with that we find and might put to productive use as a way to initially get momentum, get thickness in worlds by appropriating other things and then finding out how how they might talk to one another, rather than starting from blank slates or white, the black screen of a computer.
This workshop has kept me incredibly fearful because unlike other studios where they give you background, I am responsible for the content and the context, and he is very adamant about preserving the scaffolding and designing the structure to which I place the content.
Compared with the architecture training in Taiwan, we have really different and free experience here. Because with the digital tools, we can represent the unpredictable inner minds in every other's, unpredictable inner world in every other's mind. And by doing this, we could also understand the space, the object, the context of creating a new world. It's really interesting. Okay.
So what was really looking at the reflect what happened was that first semester when we had a face-to-face, we were working digitally. When we actually decided to go digitally, that all our project is all very physical. And so that's a very nice little reflections on looking at the work that's been done with our year 3. So these students are still currently working their final. Their final is about 2 more weeks. So perhaps I would like to introduce a couple of the alumni who graduated and currently are working in Hong Kong internationally. So we have Aaron Zhang, Carissa Lim, Michael Du, and Jasmine Chen Huan. So hopefully I will give this baton to them and I will control the slides. So first we have Aaron Zhang, who graduated from BAS 10 and MArch 13. So he is also founder of Nap Studio and architect here in Hong Kong. Okay, go ahead, Aaron.
Hello. Hello, my name is Aaron Zhang. I started my BAS in 2007 and graduated from MArch in 2013, I think. I currently run my own practice called Nap Studio and Architects. So we can go to the next slide. So we founded our Nap Studio in 2016 with basically no clients, but a couple of self-initiated projects. Luckily, we slowly got more client commissions and worked on almost 100 projects over these 4 years of time. Our works have been spanning across a wide spectrum from architecture, interior, exhibition, and even furniture and products. Like that ice mold on the previous page we designed for Biennale a while ago. Yeah, so we go to the next slide. So right after my graduation and before NAP, I was working on the design and construction of the M+ Museum in West Kowloon, and also spending a year in a local studio in Stockholm, building these daring 3-story wood houses. So next slide is when I was doing the 6 years of studies over my BAS and MArch. I've been spending like really most of the time in the studio. This is actually a picture from the City magazine, which happened to capture my final presentation BAS project, where I've been sleeping on the floor of the space for days. So also I was very active on exchange programs and workshops that have been taking me everywhere from Shanghai, Vienna, Venice, Rome to even Mumbai, which for sure have helped me to see and experience so much more than just staying in the studio. So lastly, the next slide. Before I entered the university, I'm just a very ordinary high school student in an unheard local school that I wasn't even aware of what architecture is by that time. However, the school building actually is very elegant and well designed, also by a Hong Kong U alumni a long time ago. So now when I look back, I think it subconsciously lured me into this field, which I'm very lucky. And that's the power I believe architecture could be. That's it.
Okay. Architecture is very subconscious for you, Aaron, huh?
Yeah, just keep working and designing.
Okay. Clarissa Lim will be joining us from Kuala Lumpur.
Hello. Hi, so I'm Clarissa. So I am Malaysian, but then I moved to Hong Kong lived in Hong Kong for most of my life, and then now I'm back in Malaysia, in KL. Currently, I'm a research scholar at the Hubs for Good program, which is funded by British Council, a foundation here, as well as University Malaya. And I'm also a lecturer of interior architecture at the Malaysian Institute of Art. Next. So recently, we just had, much like what's happening in Hong Kong U, Zoom critiques and the final of a module which I taught, which is called Collaborative Practice, an interdisciplinary module. And Aaron was actually one of my panel members. Next. In between master's and bachelor, I took 2 years of year out, and one of them was in a research lab called Urban Ecologies Design Lab, which is also at the University of Hong Kong, Faculty of Architecture. And we did a lot of installation work, which kind of framed my idea of synthesis of research, as well as how to display and kind of promote these ideas in space itself. Next. So during my studies, much like Aaron, I took the opportunity to go abroad a lot, but concurrently, I also taught a lot at running the career discovery and architecture program, and yeah, made a lot, as you can see from the image of the year 1 studio, how messy it can get. Next. And before that, I did a lot of photography during my high school. I studied in an IB curriculum program, so I had the opportunity to kind of indulge in visual arts and fine arts. But I also participated in the career discovery and architecture program also at Hong Kong U when I was in year 11. I think I was like 15, 16. And yeah, stuck by those ideas until now. Thank you.
Yeah, I think for students who never had the experience working on portfolio, I think that you should look at the career discovery summer program at HKU as an opportunity also to get familiar and also get acquainted with some of the programs and teachers and also the students here. So that will, sometimes you never know if you like architecture and unless you know, maybe you cut your fingers or, you know, and such. So sorry.
There's always a few. There's always a few cases every year. Had to take them to the ER.
And blood and love, right? And so we have Michael Du is joining us from Zurich in Switzerland.
Hello from Zurich. So I'm Michael, and I'm now in Zurich practicing in EM2 in Architekten, and then but as a year out, and I graduated actually last year. And next page, please. So this is the things that I'm doing now, which is also designing together with colleagues with competition entries, and then this one particularly was for a project in Hamburg, and which was extravagantly built as a model, and then yeah, we won the first prize. And next page, please. And on top of that, so during my studies, what I was doing is basically for the top left corner of of the slide was actually a photography project I'm working on, which extended from during my studies, the Shanghai studio, which we went to, and then it became like this personal, like it caught on me, and then it's still going on as a project. And then while I was also joining multiple exchange programs and trying to get the best of what outside world is like compared to Hong Kong, and then which was also like super exciting in a way, how I actually reflect on how to find myself. Could you hear me? Okay, cool. And so next page. And then this is also one of my own like other interests, which are like sound. Basically, I'm also like a music producer under a label in Shanghai. And then we went to go like several events at several studios in Hong Kong U, which like the studio conducted by Thomas about sounding architecture, which was quite an extraordinary fun and bridging like both of my interests. And then I also had an event with Cal Ng, which was a collaboration with like a 360 projection dome, and as like a showpiece of my show. So these are, I think, the interests, the things that binded myself like as an interest, and also like architecture, how music and architecture, maybe others technical stuff that could join together. And next page, please. So in secondary school, well, left side is I was just an ordinary student in actually a local high school. I come from Kowloon, and then so the left side is actually my room still now in Hong Kong. And I was like pretty into building models, and I think like these kind of small fiddly interests actually helped me, and yeah, just went on with different design techniques and themes and such. Yeah. And thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah. I hope you continue to do that music scene in Zurich, because there's a very flourishing music scenes in Switzerland.
Yeah.
Now we have Jasmine. She's actually originally coming from Taiwan, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Yeah, I'm from Taiwan and now working at Front in Hong Kong as a facade consultant. And we work with architects, engineers, fabricators, and other people from different cities over the world. And before joining Front, I was in Hokkaido in Japan doing an internship where we made this 30 meters long paper bridge in the underground of Sapporo station. And I think that time I wasn't immediately seeking like an employment after graduation then, but it was really a really good experience. Although the first day I was there, then I experienced this huge earthquake. It was 2018, but then it ended up like everything just has to be how it is. And during the studies, there was some time when because I came from Taiwan and I wasn't so familiar with how Hong Kong is as a city, so I was joining these tours, guided tours, participating in the more local communities to explore Hong Kong's history and its city, and even went on to TV. And before I come to Hong Kong during high school, I was quite into science, where I joined a conference, and that's kind of how it led me to Hong Kong, because this conference was held in HKU and brought me to see how this university life could be. Yeah, so I ended up being here.
Well, it sounds like it's a good place to end up here, and now all together back here. Now I gotta get good sections. I know Aaron's much more the senior. Since I've been here for the last 10 years, and I got to see him graduate, and also he got him to be involved. I might have some question for you. I might have two questions for you. I would like to ask you questions. How do you see the futures in your practice? Because you guys all have a very exceptional and maybe a non-traditional way of thinking. Like Jasmine, instead of working for an office, a big office, she gets to work for a small studio that works on major projects in the world. Then we have Clarissa's working more on cultural and institutional work, but using her background as an architect to touch on issues that she might not be able to find that she's working hands in hand. And Aaron is his ability to take as an advantage working within a very small but also flourishing agile. When he said he worked 100 project, can you imagine how much facility he needs to embark in? And also Michael working in Zurich. So I would like to ask you, how do you guys see your future? Just 1 or 2 sentences. Go ahead, Aaron.
Yeah. Well, for myself, it's really simple. We're gonna keep building, and that's it. We're slowly growing, and I think that the magic and the fulfillment you get from realizing a space is nothing you can compare with. So that's what I'm gonna do.
How about Michael? How about you?
For me, I actually don't know what I'm doing, but I think it's about along the way which things that I myself found that I don't that I lack. So I would like go towards it to like the next 1 or 2 year, like probably because I'm in Zurich and because I wanted to focus on more. Let's say for the next 2 years, a better way of saying dealing with constructions or tectonical details in architecture, in the theme of architecture. So for me, it's like these are the themes for just a short while, and then it would be later something else, I guess.
Great. Clarissa from Kuala Lumpur.
I think I'll probably be staying in Malaysia for my foreseeable future, to kind of indulge and explore the idea of creative and cultural spaces, because that's the topic that I'm researching on, and trying to find the in-between visual arts, fine arts, and architecture. So something in the interdisciplinary for sure.
How about Jasmine?
I think I want to go for a master's, which is related to structures and materials, and allow me to really explore and find out more in the field.
So you have a nice, very balanced. Architecture is something very tangible, material, and something intangible in terms of cultural and such. So I'm gonna give you one more question, which is only just one word you need to respond. What was your experience like Hong Kong U as an undergraduate? One word. We could start with why don't we start with Aaron?
Indulging.
Clarissa?
Pass it on to someone else first.
Okay, that's a good one. Okay, Michael. Don't cry, Michael.
I think it's excruciating.
Because sometimes a lot of these terms also become very nostalgic. How about you, Jasmine?
Intuition.
Okay. Clarissa?
Flexibility.
Okay. There you have it. As you're thinking about your situation right now, many of these students or alumni presented what was before. It's where you're right now. So you can imagine 5 years when they make these promises and achieve their goal, and you probably will be anywhere in the world, graduating in architecture school, or perhaps probably here in Hong Kong U. Thank you very much. Now I'll pass on the baton back to our next colleague then.
I think that would be me. Thank you, Thomas, Aaron, Jasmine, Michael and Clarissa for sharing your content and your experiences. It's good to see that lots of good things happen after Hong Kong U. And I guess it's our job to make sure that that continues to happen. The next panel, this panel, is titled Thinking, Testing, and Making. And the basic idea behind it, as opposed to the previous panel where we get to see a little bit of what it's like for some of our graduated students after school. In this case, we want to show you what it's like to be in our courses, what kinds of content we produce in our classes, and so on and so forth. So we will start with Eike Schling, who will be showing us some of the work they produced in first year, then followed by Su Chang, who will show us what we are producing at the moment in our second year studio, and then I will join again and show some content from our visual communications course in the fourth year studio. So Eike, whenever you can, please start.
Thank you. Thanks, Roberto. Yes, I had the pleasure of teaching the very first design studio first year, first semester. Can you see my screen? And the theme of our year was making connections, and we tried to mean that in every possible way. For once, of course, to create this community for the new incoming students, but also to think about physically what does connections mean in architecture, in space, in structure. And I have two of the students actually joining us, and hopefully they'll have some comments later. Joseph and Catherine, are you also there?
Yes, I'm here.
Cool. Catherine?
Yeah, hi, I'm Catherine.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so we started out with a team building exercise where students had to make their own structural connection in teams, so also to kind of collaborate and really quickly in just 1 week churn out something that they then had to document and test, right? They had to put loads on it, see how it would deform and see how it would break, and test all that and kind of get familiar to documenting, but also to how material behaves. And we did that not in a competitive kind of way, but in, I would say, in a team research, where every group of students tried to come up with a different solution and a different load scenario in order to inform everybody else about the possibilities. And we used a similar methodology in the next step, where we then looked at space. We first had the students design an urban site out of white material, like serving kind of as a site background, and then start making connections from their own side to their neighbor's side, creating this circulation, looking at outside space and interior space, and at the same time, of course, always thinking about how do I actually build that, how do I make that, and how do I follow a certain function, for example, from leading people to one place to another, but enhance that through lighting, through visual effects. And it all always comes down to not only doing these things on your own, but sharing them, discussing them, and finding your own arguments for them. So it's always, we always have the reviews then where these things are discussed in the group. In the second semester, we had to go digital, but we tried to keep up that community. Here you see all the colorful arrows. These are all the same class setting up a review on a digital review on a concept board. And we created this digital workflow where everybody is designing a shop house in a neighborhood. Here we have a topology, it's along a hill, and all their drawings are being mapped into a master file. So that gives them the possibility to work together digitally and design together in this space. And I'm just going to show as an example one of the project. This is Joe's project, just to give you a clear idea of the methodology we used in the second semester. We tried to cover on a very quick basis the workflow of an architect, right? Starting with an analysis. And in this case, Joe looked at these bubble tea shops, right? And he did a graphical analysis of the space, and then coming up with a concept on how to improve that. And Joe did that through his sensations and how he would like to sense that space through seeing, smelling, tasting, and how you could create intimacy to enjoy the drink even more. And then from this kind of coming up with an architectural design, and then really drawing that in a technical design drawing, and pushing that even further into details that could be used for construction, including a larger scale detailed model. So this is basically rushing through the whole spectrum in the first year. Just quickly also showing Catherine's before I want to talk to them both. Catherine had a similar idea looking at an optician shop, and she took it more on a literal, basically product kind of way. She developed this concept for a mirror that would help you to store and test out glasses at the same time, and created this very detailed facade, modular facade system from it. So Catherine, can you tell me about your experience in the first year, and maybe also talk about the challenges that you encountered? I mean, you start from basically being totally new to architecture, and now we see a very detailed drawing of an architectural construction. So how did you experience that process?
Well, I mean, the challenging part would be really to learn a lot of design tools in a short time, like the softwares and how to really create models. But I mean, throughout, I really enjoyed the process and feel really accomplished because I learned a lot. Like, I really learned to enjoy the process of how to make the work, and like, in the mind, things may work perfect until you execute them into drawings and models, and you'll want to further investigate in certain areas and do research. And so, like, towards the path that you chose, like I chose to investigate in the mirror and transparency concept. So, like, the process is always important in this course, and we can produce a product that I enjoy, and the end result is pretty enjoyable as well.
Thanks. Yeah, I think what is true is that in the beginning, it's very easy to have a concept or an idea, and then when you actually have to build it, right, then you encounter the challenges. So we try to keep doing that even remotely, even when students are remotely, that they even at home build these models. Joe, what did you enjoy most about the last year, and what are you looking forward to?
I think this year, to be fair, it's this year because I'm our first year. I think this is a good introduction course to architecture because the stuff that's given is kind of open and free, so I can experiment and so on. And I think that it's good that we are able to see what architecture is able to do, how do we do it, and then it's me by communication, group work, and so on. So I think it's a fun process. It's very different from I think most people experience when they were in secondary school or high school, where we have loads of exams and so on, and we're just studying. And now it's different approach to studying. I think it's interesting.
I think that is one of the biggest challenges we encounter, that very often we give the students a methodology, maybe, make a concept and then from that derive a space, but we don't tell them exactly what to do. You're free to choose whatever you want to do, and that's the biggest challenge in the beginning, because that's something that's you're not used to. Is that right?
Yes, because as I think we come for high school, we have very little to not a lot of knowledge about architecture unless we do research. Props to people who do, but I think we come in and we don't really know much, right? So certain terms, certain ideas, we don't have them yet. So I think it's a bit frustrating when we don't get it yet, but once you get it, I think it's very satisfying. Of course.
Yeah, great, thanks. Roberto, How should we
Right. Hello.
Thank you.
Is Su Chang on?
Yes.
All right. How about you pick up the next content, and then I'll wrap up after you.
Okay, so I'm gonna present on behalf of my our teaching teams for the second year studio and also our 65 students. So if the first year studio was about learning the tools and access the basic skills of understanding architecture, the second year is really trying to cultivate a studio culture of questioning and thinking. And our studio brief this year was called A House, a Home. And we try to really, what we're trying to do is to really question what does it mean to be a house or to be a home today. And for us, we are trying to really use the tool we learned, the modeling tool, the drawing tool we learned from the first year, and try to ask questions about the culture of architecture. For example, Fiona in the studio was asking why do we always look at a house from the outside, and whether we can use this model as a tool to really slice the house and review what's going on from the inside out. And this is another work by Francis and Mariana, really questioning why we always neglect the backside of a house and try to take the house and peel off what's it like from the back and really review what's going on, the spatial quality and the circulations of house from the back, and then really look at the house from the other angle. And then this semester, we are also assessing architecture from another perspective, and looking at the traditional houses in China. And then what we're doing is to really combine the skill we learned from the first year, the drawing tools, and then we try to relate what's going on with a two-dimensional drawing in relation to a three-dimensional space. And this is a drawing by Jenny, trying to articulate the two-dimensional plans and sections in a three-dimensional space. This one by Haley, also trying to position the sections in relation to the plans they've been doing. And we're also trying to, use new media or formats to translate this, communicate design ideas. For example, this is a GIF made by Joyce, really trying to question the dichotomy between the man-made and the natural, and really ask how can architecture grow with nature. And this one is done by Damon, really trying to question what does it mean to have a home today in relation to the natural landscape around us. So he was trying to dissect the house and introduce the pavement in relation to the surroundings. So what we are also trying to do is really emphasize the idea of a studio. So we are all learning together as a team, all the students and teachers. And I'm going to present some of the photos from what we're doing usually in notes building at our architectural studio. So really through the studio culture, we try to understand architecture as not just something that's personal, but also that can be shared with others. These are some of the scenes from studio reviews. And also you can also learn by sharing with friends and asking questions among us. So these are some of the studio discussion we had in the year before. Oh, actually it was in 2018. And also learning can be in the form of discussion in a group with your friends or with teachers, or even with visiting architects from abroad. Or you can just be using drawing as a language to really talk about architecture. And these are some of the photos we took during our studio reviews and discussions. And also, what are the tools, like when we're in a physical space, whether it is a desk or it's actually a drawing board, or now we are in a digital world, how can we use the digital tool to still cultivate that studio culture of discussion and articulate the design language. So these are what we've been doing in the second year. Roberto?
Yeah. All right. Thank you so much. let me share my screen. Almost there. All right, so I will apologize in advance because I had a really tough time trying to reduce the number of slides, but I'm going to go through them as quickly as possible. And I'm going to be showing only drawings, except for a few pictures. It is sort of my belief, a little bit my mission to somehow make sure that the level of drawing of our students is exceptional. I tend to believe that the better you are at drawing, perhaps the better you are at designing. So I started with the visual communication course. Second year students are enrolled in this, and it's quite simple. I sort of asked them to document artifacts, commonplace artifacts that are at a scale that they can sort of tamper with, that they can manipulate, so they can really look at it in detail, right? And I asked them to sort of look at a range of artifacts that belong to a similar category, thereby creating a catalog of sorts. In addition to creating the catalog, they also have to create instructions. It's sort of helping them develop the skills that they need to communicate architecture. We often have to communicate architecture as a series of steps, whether it is a concept or simply how to put something together. And then also drawing, we introduce them to drawing as a sort of layered process, right? As you can see in some of these examples, that you begin with construction lines, the construction lines eventually render a surface, and then that surface can then be operated onto, as you can see, with the section. And so the operations are also very important. Being able to pull things apart, so exploding drawings in many different ways so that we can really understand the components, the constituent parts of something. It's really important, as you can see. And it is kind of this methodology that we bring into the visual communication course, not just as a way to document, but also as a way to speculate. So some of these that you see are collages. The students are being asked to make use of the same samples, rather extract samples from their drawings, and they share their drawings collectively. So people are sort of free to create these drawing collages from each other's drawings. And the design process, in a way, is not very linear. Sort of ask them to create these collages intuitively and then retroactively look at them and see if they discover opportunities for design in them, right? Taking this further, sort of challenge them to also move away from 2 dimensions, and they're asked to kind of model these things in 3D. It's also good for them to understand how things work in 3 dimensions. And one of the final assignments of the course was essentially to create a container. Of course, they needed to create a very simple container with the constituent parts of some of their drawings, at least their concepts, and create a patent drawing that is dimensioned and documented in a similar fashion as a drawing set. And last but not least, they were sort of asked to visualize some of these artifacts, these hybrid containers, by also appropriating textures from diverse sources online or from books scanned and so on and so forth, and mapping them in an analog manner into their objects. Fast forwarding into 4th year design studio is going to be much faster. A methodology is somehow similar. So they are asked to also inspect and draw in detail, but in this case, the artifacts that they're sampling are related to their site, or they're related to their context. So in this case, the site was a sort of water edge condition, a pier in particular, and sort of asked to inspect the things that they could find there, how things are put together, how things are built, to the extent also of the water itself as the medium around which they needed to operate. And they created, similar to the visual communication course, a series of hybrid constructs based on their observations, which were then translated into projects. I'm not going to go into how that happens because there's not enough time, but these are some of the outcomes. These drawings are some of the outcomes of this process. And I think you can see that there's a level of detail, but then there's also an element of narrative. And by virtue of operating and sort of working in the section, they also get a sense of how things are put together. And of course, like in every other studio course, we discuss these collectively, in them up very large. We talk about the issues, we talk about the process, we talk about the criteria for determining, whether these drawings are effective at achieving their goals, and so on and so forth. And I'm going to show you two projects in greater detail. One by Eva, who's the girl with the red arrow on top of her head, and another one by Michael, who are joining us here today. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm just going to scroll through your content first. These are Eva's drawings. It looks a little bit low res, isn't it? Her drawings were extremely long, so it was impossible for me to actually place them on a single slide. And I'm actually showing two of her projects because this was a sort of year-long drawing studio. So she was in it twice, and this amazing perspective is the result of the second semester. And these are Michael's drawings. He also created a sort of water edge intervention, in particular a floating school, as I recall, the pontoon. And he also ventured into this exploded isometric. So Eva and Michael, thanks so much for joining us today. If I could ask you a very simple question. Eva, maybe you can start.
Yes.
I would like to know, what did you think was the most challenging, but also somehow the most satisfying thing about this drawing studio? You can share that with us.
Yes. So I think for me, the most challenging part will be how can I push the limit of architecture drawing, since in before I understood architecture drawing as in this pure construction drawing format. Also, can I say so? And
sure.
To how to tell a story in my drawing, to tell a story through my drawing, and how to construct architecture through drawing, but not only in the constructive manner, but in a more expressive way, and if I can say so. And it was really through the process of drawing and that I construct my project, and that I asked myself the question of what can be architecture and also what can architecture be. Because as for me, my project was not that I have perceived what was architecture, as I have just entered the university as like a freshman.
Thank you. Michael, can I ask you the same question?
For me, I feel like the most challenging part for me is how to approach to architecture and somehow to develop a design solution. Since somehow throughout the whole my bachelor studies, most of the time we go to a site and then we do documentation and then we build a site model. But somehow with this studio, it's kind of challenging, but also an eye-opening experience for me, that we approach a design solution through the discovery of these kind of unexpected spatial quality in drawings, and then somehow the site comes quite like the middle stage of the process. And then I think, well, throughout the whole design process, there's like also some struggle, like should we build a site model or should we do model? But I'm glad that we make the good, right decision, that's to keep it all everything on paper, because I think this is the end result is quite rewarding, that everything just goes on graphic.
Thank you. I think we are done with our panel. Ying, are we moving into a Q&A session at the moment, or?
I think everyone heard a lot of, especially our audience, heard a lot of different words that we often speak about in this building. Beyond thinking, testing, making, we talked about document, speculation, connections, narrative, process, studio, and many, many more. I think maybe we can, maybe I just conclude maybe our sessions very, very quickly because I want to share with especially our audience our prospectus, which is also online. I'll quickly share my screen because if you want to know more about what it is like to study in the BAS program, there will be quite a lot of details in this beautiful book that I just showed you. One second. And perhaps we can open the question to the audience now, because I think they are very concerned, especially to ask us about what are the things that we're looking for to get in. If the audience could, I realize I forgot to tell everyone administratively to please type in your questions so that we can actually filter them a bit. We're trying to also, this is an experiment since we're not all in the same room, to see how we can now have a conversation. So give me 1 second as I share the screen to our prospectus so that each of you can. So this is the website. Could everyone see? And if you just click on the link, you would each be able to download a copy of this PDF. If you would like a physical copy, please email to us. I'll send you the email at the end of the session. So, and somebody quickly drew a heart on there. So you can also receive a physical copy for your library. So just scroll through. It has quite a lot of information. Let me see if I can shrink it. So this is for you to read more about. So maybe we open to the questions from the audience. Once I stop sharing. Any questions from any of the? Yes, it's starting to come in. So the first set of questions seem to have to do with interviews. Is an interview compulsory for every DSE taker? And are there 2 interviews for some candidates? And are there any tips for candidates who would like to prepare for their interviews? Are there any additional questions in addition to, I see Michael smiling and Clarissa as well. The future panel smiling at the past, or the present, I should say. Maybe I could ask all the panelists to say one word. I'm now appropriating Thomas's question, to say one word about the qualities we look for, or the quality, one word. So Roberto?
Genuine.
Genuine? Chang?
Passion. You have to have passion for design. Yeah.
Passion. Eric?
I think individuality, that each person is their own unique person.
Individuality. Thomas? Oh, you have to unmute.
It was a silent word.
With a silent
Phenomenal.
word. Phenomenal.
Phenomenal.
Aika?
I guess sincere interest, right?
Sincere interest. Maybe Jasmine from the future.
it? One word?
Yeah.
Intuitive, intuitive.
Oh, same word. Okay.
Yes.
Michael?
Individualistic, I think.
Individualistic. Clarissa?
Thoughtful.
Oh. We had one more. Aaron? Is he with
All
us?
right. Challenging.
Challenging? Eva? Are you with us? Michael?
I think they were at work, so maybe they left.
I think it was also a question.
Question.
Here's a good question. How many hours of sleep does a typical BAAS student have?
For the teacher or for the student?
I guess. Joe and Catherine, are you still there?
Yep.
What's your average hours of sleep?
4.
No way.
I hope not.
I have a
Take care of
terrible
yourself.
sleep pattern.
Can we have a second opinion from someone?
Yeah, that would be good.
It might vary a lot person to person, and also what time of the semester you ask the student. If it's the first month, it's probably much better than the last month of the semester.
What we started doing now, we asked them to submit on Friday at 6 o'clock, and then the presentation is on Monday. So they don't have a chance to work all weekend.
But they still do, don't they?
Another question, what type of interest should a student have?
I think you can see from the diversity of the work, there's actually a diversity of interests that each person really brings their own idea of what architecture is, each professor, but also each student. And so I think there isn't a correct answer to what kind of interest anyone should have. I think you should have interests though, that you should be passionate about your work, be passionate about life, be passionate about making a difference as well in the world. And that's actually, I guess to paraphrase it would be to say, to be interested in making a difference would be an interest. How that interest goes into, are you good at piano? Are you good at mathematics? That's up to each person. And we're not looking for any specific type of person. We're looking for you. We're looking for each person who has a contribution to make. I'd say.
Thomas,
I think from my personal observations that the BAS is a great way to discover, unlike some of the master program where the program's a bit short, but also when you're undergraduate, you take the Common Core and maybe one of your best friends a computer science, somebody could be an historian, and you have the different type of dialogues maybe in the hall. And some people are very interested in dance, and they could bring some of the physio interests and attributes into their way of thinking. When I was college, I used to ride BMX bicycle and skateboard. So I like to start to think about architecture as something not grounded. I don't like corners. So those are a couple of things that you could also start to bring in, because I think as much you come to undergraduate here is what you bring in and what you bring out. And you can listen by a lot of the alumni, because they want to describe what they are now. You could see some of the thesis questions that they embark during the 4 years here in undergraduate at HKU.
Any other takers on the interests? I think overall you can see also from our current students as well as our past students that there's quite a bit of diversity, but also that the community very much kind of reinforces the passion and the individuality. So it's actually going it's a kind of dynamic ambience or environment that we have. in our building here.
I can see lots of questions coming up about interviews, and maybe we circle back to that in a second, because the last question that was asked, I think, is a very, very powerful one as well. It's asking about architects in Hong Kong in particular, and that there's sort of like a hierarchy to it, that there's sort of like a boss and everyone's following the order. And I think that is changing. I think actually this is changing because of Hong Kong U, I'd say. It's something that's also, I've noticed, has been changing a lot with our graduates in the last 10 to 15 years. And I think people who are already part of this conversation are excellent examples of that. People like Aaron, who started his own company soon after graduating, and that they might question how they wish to participate within the world of architecture. So it's this idea that a lot of our graduates are actually starting to form their own companies after sitting their exams, after passing their exams, and becoming architects. So instead of going on to work for someone else, they're actually working for themselves. And it's not just one or two. It's actually, I think we've seen like a huge influx of newer firms coming into Hong Kong. Many of them are Hong Kong U graduates, I'd say, a huge majority of them. And they're doing very well. They're both financially successful, I think, is safe to say. And they're also growing. So that it is a way that we can start to see that our way of teaching, our way of having an impact is actually reaching everyone as well. And it doesn't mean to say that working for a large architecture firm is a bad idea. You gain a lot of knowledge that way as well. You gain a lot of experience that you can take with you. And some people really do prefer to work for a large firm, because then you can work on, in some cases, very large projects that you wouldn't get an opportunity to work on otherwise. But it doesn't mean to say that that's the only pathway and the only career pathway for architects. And we've been doing a lot more mentorship as well, to mentor people, even our alumni who graduated years ago, decades ago. We're still in this process of continuing the conversation, because we see that it's a very valuable part of when someone comes through Hong Kong U as alumni. You're not just someone who has left Hong Kong U. You're actually still part of like the larger family around Hong Kong U. And so we are definitely committed to working with all of our people before they apply, people when they're applying to Hong Kong U, people who are here at Hong Kong U studying, and then people who have graduated and are alumni all the way through that. And I think this is also why we're so interested in also inviting our students and working with our students and our alumni for today, that this isn't just a lot of professors talking. It's actually this idea of having a dialogue and having time for questions. So I just wanted to come back to that as well.
I think Eric, I think that's a great, here's a couple examples. Carissa, 6 months ago, she asked me, she got this fellowship and she's thinking, should she do this program? I immediately replied to her in 1 second, said yes, because you're working with very good people. I know these people. And same with Jasmine, when she said, I would like to work in Japan. And I said, well, let me make a phone call to June. And immediately it just went through. So I think it's important what we're gonna be your teacher, not just during the time you're at BAS, we'll be your mentor after BAS. Yeah, is it Carissa? Is that what you want to expand some of the kind of like the mentorships that we provide? I mean,
sure, definitely. Yeah, for sure. That definitely continues once we kind of left school. But it's not only the mentorship between, the relationship between professors and students, but also between our peers. We have a very strong community within the student body. We all share the same space previously. I'm not sure about in the future, in the immediate future. But yes, definitely. We all share the same space and we all comment, go to each other's like final critiques and discuss with each other. Like for example, I asked Aaron to join my panel for my own studio final that I led. So that was really helpful to have that connection beyond school, and it lasts for a lifetime for sure.
Should we come back? Because I saw there were a few questions about interviews. So I just want to assure everyone that the interviews, actually, we just really want to get to know you better in a way. And again, there's no correct answers to anything that we'll ever ask. So it's hard to give tips to candidates. I can see that question came more than once. And also preparing, it's more just idea of really being yourself, I think, at the interview. It really isn't, there is no correct answer to any of the questions that we'll ask. And we might not necessarily ask the same question to every person either as well. But it's more general questions to get to know who you are better. And that the type of questions we're asking are pretty open-ended, meaning that we're not looking for any particular answer to that as well. And it's good to know your own portfolio, to bring your portfolio, to have your thoughts about what architecture might be. And there is no, again, correct answer of what architecture is or could be, but just to have your own way of understanding and thinking about architecture. Well, and then looping back to the exchange program as well. So for the exchange, it usually happens in year 3. And so that gives you an opportunity to go abroad. And Hong Kong U is very supportive of this, both as a department, as Department of Architecture, but also as a university. That we see this as an incredible opportunity for students, and we're really greatly encouraging that as many people as possible can go on exchange, do go on exchange. And usually it's a considerable number of people who do choose. The schools that we have exchange with, though, vary year to year, although there's often mainstays that we've had for a very, very long time. And we try to pair with very good, the best in the world architecture programs that people have wider experiences. And sometimes the value of exchange isn't just the education, it's also about having a different cultural exchange as well, to be able to live elsewhere in the world and see it from a different perspective. It's very helpful as well.
There were also a few questions about portfolio, and the portfolio is not required, but if you wish to share any of yourself, your talents, whether you've written a novel or composed a symphony or have acted in plays, please share that with us so that we know. It's again a dialogue between you and us. As much as we want to know about you, we're also, especially in this virtual open house, also trying to open our doors, even though we physically are unable to so much this year, to bring you into the community and to share the space, whether virtual or physical, with us.
Yeah, I could add something for portfolio. It doesn't have to be an art portfolio. It just has to be a creative portfolio. It could be a creative in science, creative in in your maybe sports, the way how you look at it. We're looking for creativity, not under one basket, but very diverse way of interpretations.
What is the difference between Hong Kong U and CUHK? I think that's a huge question that we often get. For one, we are located on Hong Kong Island. CUHK is located in New Territories. So that they have a brand new building. We're an older building that's quite topographic. Perhaps some of my colleagues and also our students can pipe in. I think there's, I mean, we're all the programs, I think, in the world in teaching architecture will be offering the kind of building blocks of what architecture as a discipline and as a profession is. But of course, each school has its own positioning, its own kind of constellation of interests, and that also changes and evolves with the people, with all of you who are with us. So,
I'm curious what some of our current and former students think the difference is.
Past our the future panel, if they would like to say something about.
Yeah, maybe Michael.
Michael, yes.
Aaron.
Was the question about Hong Kong U or between Hong Kong U and CUHK, or more like between Hong Kong or different other schools?
Hong Kong U and CUHK.
Well, I personally haven't been in CUHK, so I wouldn't know the exact answer of the curriculum. but then based on like all the opportunities that I could get aboard because of Hong Kong U, I have actually had quite an opportunity to reflect on my own system of like education, in a way that while I think most of the other schools, like the one I went to, ATH at Zurich, I think other architecture programs would try to get to their students a base knowledge of a lot of things, like a lot of as far as they can grasp as an architectural, like what they define architecture to be. But then I think the curriculum that I went through in Hong Kong LBAS is that they really just try to find the speciality of what you think architecture is, and then to try to make student go for it. So you get like this point sharp knowledge of like a critical thinking led results of your own discourses. And I think that is a major difference between like maybe or what is special about this education.
Maybe Aaron can answer because he critiqued CUHK panel recently, no?
Did I?
The difference between CUHK and Hong Kong U.
I was in BAS for like a decade ago, so I'm not sure if it's still the same experience what I had. But if I have to compare like my peers from Hong Kong U and CUHK, it's very obvious. You can tell from the way they think and the projects they do, especially after like a few years of practice. I would say Hong Kong is more philosophical and artsy sort of training, and the outcome is not always a building. And I actually have no buildings in my portfolio. It's all like huge, like large scale drawings. But when you compare like CUHK, they really, most of the projects about houses, centers, that is more like a human scale. But Hong Kong U has this really wide spectrum and wide variety, which I believe is even wider right now, that I think is very experimental and fun. And it's not something you can learn from working. I think it trains more like how you think instead of how you draw and how you really work. That's the main difference, I think.
Does Clarissa want to say something?
Oh. Sure, I guess because BAAS means Bachelor of Arts in Architectural Studies, whereas CUHK, I believe, is under a different kind of faculty and a different kind of process of thinking. So arts has a wide spectrum. It's about arts and humanities as a kind of like baseline before shifting on to the further definition of what architecture is. We also have a variety of teachers, but all have their own different kind of philosophies regarding architecture. So you get a spectrum and a taster almost of like what kind of school or what kind of architecture you want to proceed in your life and what that means to you. And
I maybe a larger project, how does Hong Kong U compare to other schools around the world? And that might be a larger question. Maybe perhaps some international student like Clarissa, Jasmine, and also Michael being experienced and maybe experience about these much larger aspects of education.
Right. So I went to exchange in the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna, and that school is incredibly small, and each cohort is like 10 students maybe. I think Aaron went there as well. And it's an arts academy, so fine arts academy. So first and foremost is kind of this idea of fine arts underpinning all forms and kind of endeavors in architecture. So I guess it's quite narrow in terms of their definition, but then also experimental as a consequence. So that would differ from ETH.
All right, I think it's probably a good time to finish up the session. It was a great conversation. Thank you everybody for joining. There may be some unanswered questions still remaining. I'd like you to refer to the link we shared. The prospectus might have some of the answers to your questions. Fortunately, I'm not sure we have the time to answer every single one of them.
Also, we have a lecture in about 7 minutes. If any of you could share the links, because if you want to know about the school, why not just pretend to be in the school, listen to the lectures. And then you can listen to the questions generated from afterwards, Q&A. Thank you.
I'll paste into the chat the lectures.
Yes.
Hold on a second.
And you can also find the lectures and sign up for the lecture mailing list on the website. So you can also just join the lecture mailing list, and anytime there's a lecture, you'll get an email. You can always unsubscribe if you.
There you go.
But yes, please join us this evening. And there's always lectures are available to the general public as well. So please also invite friends and others who are interested. Everyone is welcome as well to the lectures. Great.
So thank you everyone for joining us. My computer suddenly died, so I'm physically joining my colleague in the library. So we very much look forward to seeing many of you. We do have, for those who are still kind of deciding between perhaps architecture and medicine, or architecture and dentistry. We know dentistry and medicine are our main competitors, especially at Hong Kong U. It's not the end of the world if you do decide to choose another major. We have, as of this year, a 3-year program in the master's track that you can always apply to as a non-architecture undergraduate major. So we nevertheless hope that we'll get a chance to meet you and talk to you, and perhaps see you in the new semester.